The morning air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass, the suburban neighborhood humming softly with the familiar buzz of summer insects. It was early June, the kind of day that promised warmth and light stretching lazily over the hours ahead. I had been looking forward to this day for months, our long-planned family vacation, something I had insisted on arranging and paying for myself, a gesture meant to bridge the widening spaces between us. The car was packed the night before, the kids' laughter still echoing in my mind as I folded the last of the beach towels with care. I arrived at the meeting spot, a quiet cul-de-sac shaded by towering oaks where the children often played, right on time, the morning sun casting long shadows on the pavement, but the driveway was empty. My daughter's car, usually parked just behind the mailbox, was gone. The porch steps were bare, no sign that anyone had been there recently. My heart stumbled, confusion blossoming quickly into something sharper, more unwelcome. I pulled out my phone, fingers trembling slightly as I unlocked it. And there it was, an abrupt, cold text message from my daughter, those 6 simple words that cut through the morning like a blade. "There is no room for you." No explanation, no apology, just the brutal finality of exclusion. I stared at the screen as if willing the message to change, to reveal itself as a cruel joke. But it was real, unmistakable, and it felt like a door slammed shut right in my face. The neighborhood around me was alive with the usual sounds of summer, birds chirping in the hedges, the distant roar of a lawn mower, but my world had gone quiet, the hum replaced by a hollow ache that settled deep in my chest. I looked down the street, hoping to catch a glimpse of the children's bicycles or the familiar flash of my daughter's smile, but there was nothing, just an empty cul-de-sac and a message that felt like a verdict. I sank onto the low stone wall by the sidewalk, the rough surface pressing against my palms as I tried to steady my breathing. How did it come to this? Just last week, we had been laughing over dinner, sharing stories and making plans. I had imagined this trip as a way to mend the cracks, to remind us all of what we meant to each other. Instead, I was left standing alone, a stranger in the place I had called home. My mind raced, pulling at threads of recent conversations, searching for signs I might have missed. There had been moments, small, almost imperceptible, that now shimmered with new meaning. The way my daughter's eyes had flickered away when I mentioned the trip, the tightness in her voice when she spoke of schedules and commitments. I had brushed them off, telling myself she was just busy, overwhelmed by the demands of work and children. But now, those moments felt like warnings I had ignored, little fractures that had been growing beneath the surface. The sun climbed higher, casting a golden glow on the pavement, but I felt shrouded in shadow. An hour slipped by as I sat there, the neighborhood's summer chorus continuing unabated, indifferent to my pain. I thought about the children, my grandchildren, wondering if they knew, if they understood why Grandma wasn't coming this time. The thought tightened my throat, tears threatening but not falling. I felt abandoned, not just by my daughter but by the family I had nurtured, the family I had hoped would still hold me close. In that silence, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Marcus, an old friend who had always been a steady presence in my life. I hesitated before answering, my voice brittle as I said hello. "Hey," Marcus said, his tone warm but cautious. "I heard what happened. Are you okay?" His concern was a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone. I swallowed, the lump in my throat loosening just enough to speak. "I don't know. I'm at the spot where we were supposed to meet and no one's here, just a text that says there's no room for me." There was a pause on the line, then Marcus's steady voice. "That's cold. I'm sorry, but listen, do you still have access to the family accounts? You might want to check." His words caught me off guard. Financial matters had seemed secondary, unimportant in the face of such emotional hurt. But in that moment, his suggestion felt like a thread I could grasp, a way to regain some measure of control. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I do," I said softly. "I think I still do." Marcus's voice carried a hint of encouragement. "Good, take a breath. You're not powerless here. You have options." I hung up and sat back against the wall, the summer breeze stirring the leaves overhead. The idea of financial independence, something I had taken for granted, suddenly felt like a secret weapon. The message didn't just exclude me from a trip, it was a power play, a declaration that I was no longer part of their plans, but I wasn't ready to be erased. I pulled out my phone again and logged into the family account. The numbers stared back at me, still under my name, still accessible. A flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time, determination kindled inside me. Maybe this was the moment I needed, the push to reclaim my place not just as a mother or grandmother, but as a woman who refused to be sidelined. The street remained quiet except for the distant bark of a dog and the rustle of leaves. I sat there, the sunlight warming my skin, and let the initial shock begin to dissolve, replaced by a quiet resolve. The day I had anticipated with such hope had turned into a day of rejection, yes, but also of awakening. I folded the phone carefully and stood, brushing dust from my jeans. There was no room for me in their plans today, but I would find my own space on my own terms. The scent of cut grass and summer air no longer felt like the backdrop to loss, it was the beginning of something else, something I wasn't yet ready to name but knew I needed to face. As I walked slowly down the street, the neighborhood stretched out before me like a map of possibilities, each step a quiet defiance against the exclusion I had just endured. The family vacation I had planned would not happen as I had imagined, but that did not mean the journey was over. It was only just beginning. The afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the quiet streets as I wandered aimlessly, the weight of the morning's betrayal settling deeper with every step. The neighborhood, once a comforting backdrop to my family's laughter and shared moments, now felt alien and unkind. I passed the little park where my grandchildren loved to play, the swing sets swaying gently in the breeze, mocking the absence of their joyful voices. My fingers traced the rough bark of a maple tree, grounding me as my mind spiraled through the tangled threads of recent conversations and unspoken words. How had I missed the signs, the subtle shifts in tone when my daughter spoke, the way her smiles had grown tighter, more forced? I recalled the last family dinner, the quiet tension that lingered beneath polite chatter, the way her eyes darted to her phone more often than usual. I had dismissed it all as the stress of balancing work and motherhood, too eager to believe that our bond was unbreakable. But now the truth was undeniable, the distance between us had been growing and I was the last to notice. I found a bench beneath a spreading elm and sat down, the rough wood pressing against my palms as I tried to steady my racing heart. My phone buzzed again, this time a message from Marcus, "Thinking of you. If you need anything, I'm here." Simple words, but they felt like a lifeline tossed across a stormy sea. I typed back a quick thank you, grateful for the steady presence in a day that had spun wildly out of control. That moment of connection sparked a new clarity. I wasn't completely alone, and perhaps, just perhaps, I still held more power than I had realized. My thoughts turned back to the family accounts, the financial threads that bound us in ways I hadn't fully appreciated until now. I remembered how, despite the growing tension, I had maintained control over the joint bank accounts, a fact I hadn't shared openly, perhaps out of habit or a lingering trust that things would stay the same. With a deep breath, I pulled out my phone once more, fingers trembling as I logged into the online banking app. The numbers stared back at me, still there, still accessible. The balance was healthy, a bulwark against the sudden isolation I felt. I scrolled through recent transactions, noting the absence of any withdrawals or charges related to the trip. It was clear now that my daughter and her family had made plans without me, not just emotionally but financially. A surge of mixed emotions coursed through me, hurt, disbelief, and beneath it all, a flicker of resolve. The betrayal was not just in words or absence, it was in the calculated exclusion from the resources I had helped build. The realization was bitter, but it also illuminated a path forward. If they thought they could shut me out, they had underestimated my quiet strength. I found a corner cafe nearby, a small refuge where the scent of fresh coffee and the hum of soft music offered a brief respite. I ordered a cup and sat by the window watching the world move around me while I pieced together my next steps. Marcus's call earlier echoed in my mind. His suggestion to assess my financial standing was more than practical advice. It was a call to reclaim my agency. As I sipped the warm brew, I thought back to the times I had quietly managed the household finances, balancing bills and savings accounts with a diligence that often went unnoticed. It had been my way of contributing, of safeguarding our family's future. Now, that stewardship took on new meaning. It was not just about money, it was about control, respect, and the power to define my own place in this fractured family. I dialed Marcus back, my voice steadier than before. I've checked the accounts. I still have access and the funds are intact. They haven't touched the trip money. That's good, he said, relief evident in his tone. It means you can decide how to use those resources. Don't rush, but don't do nothing either. This is your chance to set boundaries. His words resonated deeply. Boundaries, a concept I had long struggled with, always giving and forgiving, hoping love and patience would be enough. But today had taught me that love, when unreciprocated, could be a trap. It was time to protect myself, to be intentional about my own needs and limits. The afternoon waned, the golden light softening into a cooler shade as I left the cafe and wandered toward the small park again. Children's laughter floated faintly on the breeze, a bittersweet reminder of what I was missing. I sat on a swing, the chains creaking as I moved gently back and forth, letting the rhythm soothe the storm inside me. I thought about the upcoming days, the silence that would fill the house where my daughter's family had once been. It was a silence I had not invited but would have to endure. Yet within that emptiness, I felt the stirrings of something new, a quiet determination to reclaim my space, my voice, and my dignity. I pulled out my phone again, drafting messages and notes, considering who I might call, what steps I could take to protect myself financially and emotionally. The thought of a solo trip, once unthinkable, now flickered tentatively in my mind, not as a punishment or escape, but as a chance to rediscover joy on my own terms. As twilight settled, casting long shadows over the park, I stood and brushed the dust from my jeans. The path ahead was uncertain and the wounds still raw, but I was no longer paralyzed by shock or sorrow. With Marcus's steady support and the quiet strength I was beginning to muster, I was ready to face what came next. The day's events had stripped away illusions, exposing the fractures in my family and the painful reality of exclusion. But they had also revealed my own resilience, a well of strength I hadn't fully known existed. I tucked my phone into my pocket and took a deep breath, the cool evening air filling my lungs with promise. Tonight, I would rest. Tomorrow, I would begin to build the boundaries I needed, step by deliberate step. The family I had cherished might have turned away, but I was learning that my own story was far from over. In the quiet moments beneath the fading light, I felt the first stirrings of empowerment, the quiet resolve to reclaim my life on my own terms. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains, casting a gentle glow across the room as I sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, the familiar hum of the city waking up beyond the window. Sleep had been elusive, my mind still tangled in the events of the past day, the sting of exclusion now tempered by a cautious clarity. I was no longer just the hurt mother left behind, I was becoming someone who could take control, quietly but firmly. I dialed Marcus's number, the connection clicking through before his warm voice greeted me. "Good morning, how are you holding up?" "Better," I admitted, voice steady but edged with the resolve I was beginning to feel. "I've thought a lot overnight. I checked the accounts again. I still have full access to the family funds." "That's important," Marcus said, his tone encouraging. "They might have tried to shut you out emotionally, but as long as you control the finances, you have leverage. It's not about punishment, it's about setting boundaries and protecting yourself." His words resonated deeply. I realized that the car disappearing, the text message, the cold shoulder, they were more than personal slights. They were calculated moves in a power play, attempts to rewrite the family dynamic without me, but I wasn't ready to be sidelined or silenced. I spent the morning methodically reviewing recent transactions, noting the absence of any charges tied to the trip. It was clear they had proceeded without me, carefully erasing my involvement. The realization stung, but it also lit a fire in me, not of anger, but of quiet determination. I could respond not with anger or desperation, but with calm, deliberate action. I drafted a message to my daughter, choosing my words with care. I didn't want to inflame the situation, only to assert my position firmly. I've noticed you made plans without including me. I still control the family account and will be managing the finances going forward. I hope we can find a way to communicate respectfully moving forward. I hesitated before sending it, the vulnerability of reaching out mingling with the strength of setting a boundary. Finally, I pressed send, the message going out like a small but significant declaration. The phone remained quiet for a while, the silence thick and heavy. Then, a flurry of calls and texts from my daughter began, questions, pleas, attempts to explain and negotiate. But I held firm, choosing not to respond immediately. The hurt was still raw, but beneath it was a growing firmness. I wouldn't be drawn into frantic arguments or emotional manipulations. This was my moment to stand steady. As the day wore on, I felt an unexpected calm settling over me. The initial shock of exclusion had given way to a measured resolve. I realized that my daughter's choice to exclude me was a painful truth I had to accept, but it didn't define me. I was more than the sum of their rejection. Later, I sat by the window, watching the neighborhood life unfold. Children played in yards, neighbors exchanged greetings, the ordinary scenes of daily life continuing as if nothing had shifted. And yet, beneath the surface, my world had changed irrevocably. I thought about the boundaries I needed to establish, not just financial but emotional and physical as well. It was time to protect myself, to prioritize my well-being over the desperate hope for inclusion. The quiet power of self-respect was becoming clearer, a light guiding me through the fog of betrayal. In the evening, Marcus stopped by, his presence a balm to my unsettled heart. We talked long into the night, strategizing not just about the finances but about how I could rebuild my life beyond this fracture. His steady support reminded me that I was not alone, that I had allies even when my own family seemed distant. As I prepared for bed, I felt a sense of closure to the day's turmoil. I was no longer a passive victim of their rejection. I had taken the first steps toward reclaiming my agency, setting the stage for a new chapter defined not by pain but by quiet strength and deliberate choice. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in days, I felt ready to walk it on my own terms. The morning light spilled over the kitchen counter as I sat down with a cup of tea, the warmth seeping into my hands but doing little to ease the tight knot in my chest. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirp of birds outside the window. Outside this calm, a storm was brewing, one I had now chosen to meet head-on with a resolve that surprised even me. I unlocked my phone and opened the banking app once more, fingers steady despite the lingering ache. It was time to act. The joint family account, once a symbol of shared trust and connection, had become a battleground in an unspoken war. I navigated to the settings and began to block access for the other parties, severing their ability to draw from funds I had helped secure and manage for years. This wasn't about retribution, it was about reclaiming control and setting clear boundaries. With the final confirmation, I felt a quiet surge of empowerment. The numbers on the screen no longer represented just money, they were a statement. Exclusion would not be met with silence or surrender. I drafted a message to my daughter, choosing my words with care and clarity. I have blocked access to the joint account. Moving forward, I will manage the finances independently. I hope this will encourage us to communicate with respect and honesty. Sending the message felt like sending a ripple through still water, small but enough to cause waves. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed with incoming calls and texts. Her voice filled the line, a mixture of frustration and desperation. "Mom, why are you doing this? We need that money for the trip. I don't understand what this is about." I listened quietly, the flood of emotions rising within me, but I held firm. "I understand your concerns," I replied evenly, but I cannot ignore the way you excluded me. This is about respect and boundaries. We need to rebuild trust before I can consider restoring access." Her voice wavered, pleading for understanding, for reconciliation. But beneath her words, I sensed the same old patterns, the expectation that I would acquiesce, forgive, and forget to keep the peace. Not this time. I had learned that peace built on sacrifice was a fragile illusion. As the day wore on, the calls continued, messages arriving in quick succession, yet I remained silent, choosing reflection over reaction. The decision to block access was not made lightly. It was a boundary, a line drawn in the sand. I realized that their choice to exclude me had consequences, and those consequences would ripple through our fractured family dynamic. Later, sitting by the window, I watched a family in the park, parents tossing a ball to their children, laughter ringing pure and unburdened. The sight was bittersweet, a reminder of what I had hoped for and what had been taken from me. But it also ignited a resolve to protect myself from further erosion. I thought about the boundaries I needed, not just financial but emotional and physical. I needed to shield my heart from the sting of rejection while remaining open to the possibility of healing on my own terms. The act of blocking the account was a first step, a declaration that I would no longer be invisible or sidelined. As evening fell, the house settled into a quiet rhythm. The phone remained silent, the absence of calls a stark contrast to the earlier frenzy. I felt no triumph in this silence, only a solemn acceptance of the truth. My family had chosen exclusion and I had chosen self-respect. I poured myself a glass of water and sat back, the cool liquid soothing a raw part of me. This was not the end but a beginning, a moment to reclaim my voice and chart a new course. I was learning that boundaries were not walls but bridges, pathways to healthier connections if others were willing to meet me there. In the stillness, I felt the slow unfurling of strength, a quiet power that did not shout but simply was. I was no longer waiting for permission to exist in their world. I was claiming space on my own terms, ready to face whatever came next with a steady heart. The days that followed were marked by a quiet shift, subtle yet undeniable. The house, once filled with the sound of plans and laughter, now held a different rhythm, a stillness that echoed the absence of my daughter's family. Their scramble to adjust without the financial support I had once provided was a painful testament to the consequences of their dismissal. I watched from the sidelines as their carefully laid plans unraveled, a silent witness to the reality of exclusion. Yet, amid the turmoil, I found a space to breathe, a moment to reclaim the boundaries I had begun to set. The act of blocking access to the joint account was more than a financial maneuver. It was a declaration of independence, a refusal to be erased or sidelined. The weight of betrayal still lingered, but it was tempered now by a growing sense of self-possession. One morning, as the sun spilled golden light across the kitchen table, I sat with a notebook open before me, pen poised to write. The idea of a solo trip, once distant and almost foreign, had blossomed into a tangible plan, a journey not of escape but of rediscovery. I imagined waking in a quiet room overlooking the sea, the smell of salt water mingling with the promise of new beginnings. It was a vision of peace and autonomy, a space where I could nurture myself away from the shadows of family drama. I began to sketch an itinerary, careful to include moments of solitude and small adventures that would fill my days with joy. The thought of walking unfamiliar streets, sampling local foods, and watching sunsets without the weight of expectation felt liberating. This trip was not a retreat but a reclamation, a way to rewrite the narrative that had so recently been fractured. As I planned, I noticed a lightness growing within me, a subtle shift from victimhood to agency. The act of setting boundaries had opened a door to new possibilities, revealing that my life could be defined not by exclusion but by choice. I was learning to prioritize my own well-being, to embrace the autonomy that had been overshadowed by years of trying to hold a family together. Friends and neighbors began to notice the change as well. Invitations to lunch, gentle check-ins, and offers of companionship reminded me that connection was still possible outside the confines of my fractured family. I accepted these gestures with gratitude, allowing myself to lean on support while building my own resilience. One afternoon, Marcus dropped by with a small bouquet of wildflowers, a simple gesture that felt like a balm to my spirit. We talked about the coming trip, the plans I was making with cautious excitement. His steady presence was a reminder that I was not alone in this journey, that support could come in many forms. Despite the progress, moments of sadness still surfaced, unexpected pangs of longing for the family I had once known, the shared memories that now felt distant. But rather than denying these feelings, I let them wash over me, acknowledging their place in my healing without letting them define it. I found solace in small rituals, morning stretches by the window, journaling under the soft glow of a lamp, tending to a small herb garden on the balcony. Each act was a thread weaving a new tapestry of self-care and empowerment, a deliberate choice to nurture myself in ways I had long neglected. The trip, when it finally arrived on the calendar, was both exhilarating and daunting. Packing my bags felt symbolic, a shedding of old expectations and an embrace of the unknown. I told no one of my plans initially, choosing to keep this journey sacred, a gift to myself unburdened by others' opinions or judgments. On the morning of departure, as I closed the door behind me, the familiar neighborhood stretched out in quiet stillness. There was no regret, no looking back, only a steady forward step into a future I was beginning to shape with intention. The road ahead was uncertain, but I carried with me a newfound strength, the knowledge that exclusion was not the end of my story. It was a painful chapter, yes, but within it lay the seeds of empowerment and renewal. I was choosing to write the next pages with courage, grace, and a commitment to honoring my own worth above all else. The quiet of my new apartment was a stark contrast to the chaos of the weeks before, but it felt like freedom, a blank page on which to rewrite my story. The scent of lavender from a small pot on the windowsill mingled with the soft hum of the city outside, a gentle reminder that life continued, with or without the family I had known. Here, in this space of my own making, I began to breathe again. The lessons of betrayal and exclusion were still fresh wounds beneath my skin, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they had become the crucible in which I forged a new sense of self, one not reliant on others' acceptance or approval. The strength I had discovered was quiet, not loud or flashy, but steady and unyielding, like the roots of an old oak tree weathering countless storms. Each morning, I tended to the lavender, watching its green leaves reach toward the light, a small act of care that grounded me. It was a ritual of healing, a way to nurture life beyond the tangled web of family drama. In those moments, I felt connected to something larger, a sense of growth and possibility that extended beyond pain. I reflected on how easily I had once placed others at the center of my world, letting their choices dictate my happiness and sense of worth. The sharp sting of being cast aside by those I loved had been a devastating blow, but it was also a profound awakening. I was learning that true strength came not from clinging to what was lost, but from embracing the unexpected solitude as a space for renewal. The days unfolded slowly, each one a step away from the shadow of rejection and toward the light of self-discovery. I found joy in small things, a walk through a sun-dappled park, a phone call with a friend who listened without judgment, the comforting rhythm of a good book in my hands. These were the threads weaving a new fabric of life, one stitched with intention and self-respect. There were moments when loneliness crept in, a quiet ache that reminded me of what had been broken. But I met those moments with kindness toward myself, acknowledging the pain without letting it consume me. I was no longer the woman who waited by the phone, hoping for a call that might never come. I was becoming someone who could stand alone and still feel whole. In the stillness, I realized that healing was not a destination but a journey, a breath drawn slowly, a step taken deliberately. It was in the quiet moments, away from the noise of betrayal and expectation, that I found the truest parts of myself. Those parts were resilient, capable, and deserving of love, starting with my own. Looking forward, I chose not to let the fracture in my family define the horizon of my life. Instead, I envisioned new beginnings painted with the colors of hope and possibility. The past was a chapter closed, a story that had taught me painful lessons but also gifted me clarity and courage. As I stood by the window, watching the sun dip below the skyline, I felt a peace that had once seemed out of reach. The lavender swayed gently in the evening breeze, and I smiled quietly to myself. I was no longer waiting for others to make space for me, I was creating my own. My life would no longer revolve around those who had tried to erase me. Instead, it would center on growth, resilience, and the quiet power of choosing myself every day. The future was unwritten, and for the first time in a long while, that felt like the greatest gift of all.